Hi, it's Dr. Steve Hassan. It's Wednesday, March 26th, 2025. We're doing a live stream. Lots of things happening, just a continuing overload of stuff that's happening. I want to start by just focusing in on the I of the BITE model, which stands for information control. Um, as you know, we're perceptually based organisms, and we're taking in information. This information forms itself into our beliefs. That becomes a filter for how we look at reality. And mind control authoritarians always want to control information. They want to lie, overtly lie, withhold vital information, or distort it to get people into their mind control trap. But to keep them in there, they need constant propaganda. They need to refute any critical information, so-called fake news, former members of the administration. They're evil now. It's a formula. And so it becomes even more critical that we focus in on trustworthy information sources as we go forward. I've mentioned previously that I've been subscribing to something called ground.news, which aggregates news stories and kind of designates them. These are biased to the progressive, this is biased to the authoritarian, or this is mainstream. But it's critical to know people who really are experts, who really understand their stuff. So Heather Cox Richardson is someone that I follow. Bandy Lee is a forensic psychiatrist who's an expert on dangerousness that I follow. So choose sources that are really important to you. And I want to share a source that I've been relying on for a number of years, Dave Troy. Dave has now a newsletter at America 2, letter number 2.news, as well as a podcast, Dave Troy Presents. And Dave wrote something really important. We'll share the links on our social media about understanding what's going on, specifically with myths that many people have about Republicans. So I'm going to just go through it quickly, and we'll give the URL for the longer article that you can check out for yourself. But he says Republicans are a monolith. That's a myth. That in fact there are factual divisions, differences in worldviews between Republicans. So what we need to do is amplify and exploit those divisions, repeating again and again to achieve as many misaligned factions as possible. Myth number 2, to believe that it's all about greed, profits, taxes, corruption, and government contracts, because he believes, I believe, that this is about collapsing the government itself, to dismantle the federal government itself. So explain in clear terms that extremists are aiming to not just profit from government business, but actually to do grave permanent harm to our government. Myth 3, Republicans will never do something that harms them. Not true. There are monetary policy extremists, including crypto, pushing for collapse, and a lot more traditional business people who want stability, who want to have business. Another myth, it's about religion, theocracy, and Christian nationalism. It's partly that, but there are other agendas. Don't lump them all together, and understand about the Musk, Thiel, Zuckerberg network state agenda to create their own version of reality. So understand. And I'll say that Dave's podcast with Gil Duran was worth listening to about the network state. Republicans all approve of what's going on. That's also a myth, because there are factions and people are starting to get very upset as they lose their jobs, as they're worried about Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security. And we need to bring the disaffected Trump supporters to us and focus a lot of our messaging on Republican senators and Congress people, especially their constituents, to keep messaging. What we want to avoid is people just self-censoring to protect themselves and not speaking truth to power, because there's a lot more of us than them, and there's strength in numbers. So I'm very much an activist, and asking you if you are willing to join me in messaging. Very important. And the latest story was with the Houthi strike and a Signal chat thread that included Jeff Goldberg of The Atlantic by accident. And what's so interesting is that what they did is so horrible and breaking so many laws, probably actionable offenses, and if things were normal. But Trump is even saying nothing classified was discussed, which is just flat out incorrect, and a lie. So what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing is that anyone who's a professional military person knows that this administration, Hegseth, does not know what he's doing, cannot be trustworthy. Certainly all of our former allies are seeing things like this, knowing that they can't trust folks. So I said this last live stream: if you have family or friends in the military, start a discussion now with whether or not they will be faithful to their oath to the Constitution, or whether they would follow a command to, for example, harm American civilians if they were ordered to. We need to have that conversation. I see there are lots of questions coming in, so I'm going to start. Responding, David Wicklin: I wonder if courts will start disbanding other cults in other parts of the globe. I was a devout Jehovah's Witness, young convert for 25 years, and Norway essentially just approved their shunning. So David is referring to, and I meant to mention this in my opening comments, but Japan has dissolved my former cult, the Moonies. They literally dissolved them. They've only done it twice before in history, and the last time they did it was with the Aum Shinrikyo sarin gas terrorist cult. And I was in contact with my colleague in Japan, asking if the Moonies' appeal might be successful to be reinstated, and he thought no, because they've been researching this for 3 years. And of great interest, and I did an 8-minute video, by the way. If you haven't seen it, it's up on my YouTube. Maybe Cami can put the link here of my video when I learned on Tuesday about their being dissolved. But the man who killed former Prime Minister Abe was the son of his mother was a Unification Church cult member who gave over all of the family wealth to the cult. And he told me, my contact in Japan, that he believes that when Hak Jahan, Moon's wife, who took over the main cult after he died in 2012, paid Donald Trump $2.5 million to endorse them. And this endorsement was done a few weeks after January 6th. When he had heard that, that set him off to try to kill and killed the former prime minister. But in unbelievable fashion, that led to so much attention on his motivation, former members coming forward, the fact that the Moonies had done the largest consumer fraud case in Japanese history, involving 35,000 Japanese citizens, where they were scanning obituaries and knocking on people's doors saying their deceased husband, wife, told them to come and get a donation from them to help the deceased loved one elevate in the spirit world. Well, that was called the spiritual sales scam. So the Moonies have a long history of doing illegal, improper, immoral things, and I'm thrilled that they were disbanded. Regarding Norway, regarding the US, can you imagine a United States where we start taking away tax exemption status for every mind control authoritarian cult that's harming its members and trafficking them? That's my dream. But what we're facing with now, because Trump has basically made everyone swear a loyalty oath to him, we have a situation where judges are, responding to these illegal, unconstitutional actions of the Trump administration. But who's going to enforce it? Because Trump is controlling the DOJ. So we have a real problem with implementation of judges. And then with judges, Trump started talking about impeaching judges or appointing new judges and having a shadow court to push everyone through. So we're in existential moments where we're seeing history unfold in ways it's never done before. Debbie Cook, I've been trying to ask about the network state. Can you address that cult that is now in our government? So very briefly, I first learned of this concept from Ian Bremmer, who did a TED Talk on the topic, that he believes the tech billionaires want to be supranational. They want to be above governments. They don't want regulation, and they want to directly influence the people under their control. The ideologue Curtis Yarvin says that democracy is broken. We need a CEO/king to run things. And the idea is that the tech bros who controlling information space and satellites want their own control. So the question is, when push comes to shove, who's going to have the power, or will there be a power sharing thing? I'm definitely planning to do more about the network state and this whole notion that reality is getting reorganized online. Because I really believe that we should be focused not on Mars, but on Earth. And we should be putting much more attention on building our communities in real life and activism where we're lifting each other up, where we're not living in isolation or just doing pixels 8 to 10 hours a day. Oh, Pam Hempel, thanks for being factual information. Pam is a courageous, heroic figure in my mind. She was arrested and served 2 months for the January 6th violent coup, and she's been speaking out courageously. And when Trump gave his unconditional pardon to many violent criminals, Pam was public saying, I don't want a pardon. I know what I did was wrong. I accept my punishment, and as everyone should. So, and let's see, Taylor Lucas on TikTok asks, how do we challenge their worldview without them viewing us as conspiracy theorists. So we need to always operate from resourcefulness, not be from anger and impulsiveness. We want to always think before we react. Are we going to be doing and saying something that will be constructive and helpful, or will it be reinforcing a current worldview? And what I'm trying to get at here is if you step inside the mind of a cult member who's been indoctrinated to believe the whole world has demons, that everyone who isn't part of the Trump, group is demons, being nice and respectful and kind and talking about common areas of interest, whether it's sports or having children or dogs or cats, it's always the better first approach, and asking questions versus trying to persuade through facts and rationality. And as people who've been following my work, reading Combating or Freedom of Mind or The Cult of Trump, or taking my online course, they know that attacking the leader, the doctrine, or the group head on activates the programmed identity to be defensive and to view you as the enemy. So the key, again, is being open-minded, being a good listener, and asking a question, being patient for an answer, and then following up, tell me more, or can you explain that with more detail, to encourage the person to think for themselves. So let's see, it's hard. Tori M. Baker, it's hard because the military is so ingrained to be obedient to the superiors and chain of command. The UCMJ permits disobedience to illegal orders, but it seems legality is subjective lately. Well, Tori, the military had its own Supreme Court justices, but Trump had them fired. So it was their job to, if an executive order was given that was unconstitutional, for them to rule and tell soldiers, no, this is not a constitutional order. You should disobey the commander in chief. Without that chain of command, then it's a matter of being clear about your oath to the Constitution and your honor to your conscience. And either the military is going to stop being a professional force and just implement partisan policy. It remains to be seen. K Clock says, Dr. Hassan, on YouTube, I get ads for Shen Yun dance at Lincoln Center at the David Koch Theater. Meanwhile, New York Times is reporting they are a cult. How is this happening in plain sight in New York City? So Falun Gong, which is, in my experience, my opinion, a destructive authoritarian Chinese cult with an enlightened master running the group, has this dance troupe called Shen Yun. They're spending huge amounts of money advertising and renting Lincoln Center, etc. And I still meet people who have not heard that the New York Times did these two very in-depth pieces about how they've been trafficking these young people and taking advantage of these young people. There's one person that I met recently at a meeting, and he said he doesn't trust anything the New York Times says. So that was his answer, the notion of fake news. Can't believe it. But I can tell you that Falun Gong also owns and operates Epoch Times, EPOCH, which was one of the most egregious propagandist vehicles and continues to be. So the question is, how can this be in plain sight? Well, because most people are not paying attention, or they're distracted, or they think it's just going to be a fun, entertaining evening, and they don't realize they're funding an authoritarian group, and that's going to try to hit them up for donations. Let's see, Mavis. The man who killed Abe has yet to begin his trial and is being held in police custody. It's unusual for a suspect to be held this long without a trial. Mavis, I was unaware that that he's being held, and I'm not sure. I mean, I suspect there'll be a trial because he killed Abe. Everybody who was there watched the assassination. So, but I don't know the answer to that. And Nancy Wallace gave a super chat, $5. Thank you, Nancy. And I continue to hope that some major organizations will grant freedom of mind an operating budget so we can do so much more messaging, content, and we want to particularly focus on former cult members as agents who can share their personal stories about being involved with an authoritarian cult or regime. Let's see, Svi Harkin, as a young nation, I think we are prone to new religions, sects that tend towards cults. Well, I don't know. The U.S. is over 200 years old, and I would say history has said that when there's great economic and political uncertainty, that's when authoritarian cults really pop up and people are a lot more susceptible. I would argue that because of the digital age we live in, and AI and algorithms and platforms owned by bad actors, this has never been like this today. And therefore, we really have to protect our minds. We don't want to be on for hours at a time, social media. We want to be in the real world. And we want to educate everyone about the difference between healthy groups and unhealthy authoritarian cults. And with that, people who've been following me for a while know I have an influence continuum of ethical to unethical, and the BITE model of authoritarian control that looks at behavior, information, thought, and emotional control. And I invite people to go to bitemodel.com and fill out a shortened survey that will give you a number of how healthy or unhealthy the group that you filled out is. Time Lord says, I just want to say thank you for your books. I'm an XJW, and it's helped me a lot with the shutting down of the Moonies in Japan. Gives me hope one day that the same will happen with the Watchtower. Me too. You know, I didn't think the JWs were a cult until 1989 when my book Combating Cult Mind Control first came out. And I started hearing from former JWs who said, loved your book. How come you didn't mention the Watchtower? And I said, why? And they said, because I underlined the whole book. You described my experience. So I said, teach me. And so I've been learning ever since and helping folks exit and coaching families on how to talk to their loved ones still in. But it within the first year, I realized that the JWs have a Bible that they've made that isn't respected by Christian or Jewish theologians. So when they're knocking on doors or asking to study the Bible, they're basically deceiving people into membership. So lack of informed consent. Let's see, Magson Mars on TikTok sent the gift. So thank you, Magson Mars. A lot of interesting names. Let's see, Tam Jules. Hi, Dr. Hassan and all. I wonder why Americans are so susceptible to cults and what is the psychology behind it. It seems to me over the years there have been a lot of them and all mind control type. So I really invite you to read The Cult of Trump. I go back in The Cult of Trump to Edward Bernays, whose 1928 book Propaganda was viewed as the beginning of the PR, advertising, marketing industry. Bernays was a nephew, I believe, of Sigmund Freud. And he said, you don't sell the product, you sell the need for a product. And he was hired to do the first presidential election, as well as hired by businesses to tell them how to market. Goebbels tried to hire him for Hitler. He said no. But there's been an ever increasing sophistication in wanting to understand how the mind works, what's social psychology about, and in recent years, a real push to neuroscience to understand the different parts of the brain and the connection between parts of the brain and consciousness. And so what I say is it's your mind and only you should control it. And the best way you can protect yourself is to learn about how the mind works and social psychology and the techniques and tactics that are being used online. And I want to also just say there's just a huge amount of unethical people using hypnosis and NLP online. So be very careful interacting with strangers. Beware of guided meditations for free that you can download. I would never listen to something that was generated by a stranger that purported to be hypnosis, because I protect my mind. And when I'm hired to evaluate a cult leader in terms of their mind controlling stuff, I'll ask for, videos or audios, and I will listen, but I will hit the pause button so that I remain meta to what I'm listening to, so I can keep critical about what patterns and what techniques I'm using. K Clock says YouTube also tried to feed me Epoch Times content for a while, which I ignored. Thanks for the answer, Dr. Hassan. Sure. And just understand we have China that wants to disrupt America's power in the world. We have Putin and Russia, Iran, North Korea, and then we have Michael Flynn, and we have Steve Bannon, and Roger Stone, and Alex Jones, and a whole bunch of Christian nationalists and dominionists. And then we have the libertarian, folks that, again, want not to have a functioning government where they get taxed or regulated. Let's see, Joker 37. How many dual cult survivors do you think there are between the born-ins and second generations out there? So born-ins are what I consider second generation. So I'm not sure you meant to say it that way. But we're talking about millions of people who were born or raised in authoritarian cults, plus people who were recruited into authoritarian cults who have left. So I estimate there's tens of millions of people out there who self-identify as a former cult member, but they're not public about it. They're not willing to message on social media about it. Maybe they're still feeling some stigma or shame about it. Maybe they haven't done their counseling and their healing and recovery work yet. But that's what I think we who've experienced the loss of control of our minds and bodies, I think can be at the forefront of speaking out against mind control. Let's see, Tati on TikTok says, as someone in the LDS church, it's starting to feel super culty. How do we leave a cult without upsetting family members still in, especially the constant guilt trip? So great question. I have a lot of material about the Mormons on my Substack, in my YouTube. I was interviewed by John Dehlin of Mormon Stories podcast when I was out in Utah. He sat me down for 2 consecutive days and did 3.5-hour interviews with me. And so when you're leaving a group that you were born in and your whole family is still in, you have to start with yourself and getting really clear and develop an exit strategy for yourself. And there are many people who've left who've helped their families leave that you can network with, hear their suggestions, but you have to personalize it and think of your own specific case. If you have a number of brothers and sisters, I'm sure you're closer with one or two than the others, and that's where I would encourage you to start conversations. But I wouldn't be precipitous, and I would make an exit plan is my best advice. And the other thing I've said before, I'll repeat it again, is that if you're talking to people in the Mormons, talk about the Jehovah's Witnesses, or talk about the Moonies, or talk about some other group, and engage family members in a conversation about brainwashing and mind control, and ask them questions like, what do they think it is? How do they do it? Because the JWs say ex-members are horrible and terrible and cut off contact too. So you understand the method. Let's see. I feel bad because my JWs relatives are so nice and honest in every other way. People in cults are nice. They're good people, of course. So you have to separate out the person's authentic self from their cult identity that needs to be dependent and obedient. Because when people are nice in the cult, they're nice when they leave. And if people are nice before they get recruited into a cult and they get out, then they're nice again. Let's see, Amanda, can you talk about the new svelte Jesus being marketed during the authoritarian Christian revival at present? Thank you, Amanda. Amanda posts a lot of interesting content and important things. She, on a chat, shared an image of this hulky, bearded, whitish Jesus that's being marketed, is like join the group, join Jesus. And so it's really about marketing and understanding who you're marketing to. And that image is particularly going to be powerful with young women, girls, young women, and single women, I would say. Because why have an image of Jesus dead on the cross when you can have a vibrant, guy who's been working at CrossFit, has muscles and a cute trimmed beard. So thanks for that. I'm a dreamer. Or why are Trump supporters so deep in the cult without even meeting him? Actually, most people in cults never meet the guru or the cult leader ever. And what I want to say about that is that the more distance a person has to the cult leader, the more it frees one up to project meaning and project love to, for example, Sun Myung Moon. I got to be, literally smelling his BO as he walked past me, or looking and seeing he didn't clean the wax in his ears. But most people never have contact with the cult leader, and it just makes it easier to project goodness and love onto someone you have no clue about. Have you read any of Sam Harris's books? He's a neuroscientist. I'm very aware of Sam Harris's work, and Sam is a neuroscientist. He's also very loudly an atheist. Myself, I don't identify as an atheist. I believe in spirituality. I identify as a Jew. And many people have said that I should have him on my podcast. I've invited him. Many people have told him he should have me on, but he hasn't invited me. But maybe he will at some point. Maybe you can contact him and make a suggestion again. McMaslin never thought of guided meditations being an issue. Yep, it's an issue. So again, it's a matter of words and semantics. But as someone who's been studying hypnosis since the 80s, it's all about inducing an altered state of consciousness. And there's nothing wrong with an altered state. But this altered state makes you more vulnerable to suggestions. Your critical thinking is offline. And so whether or not you're in someone's office or on stage being inducted into trance, or someone is saying, we're going to do a guided visualization now or guided meditation, but they're inducing an altered state of consciousness where you're no longer critically evaluating who is this person and what are they saying and is there an ulterior motive, you can be taken advantage of. So I'm very, very concerned about the terminology that's applied. I look at the behavior. Tams, Dr. Hassan, wondering on your thoughts of Clarence Thomas's wife, Ginny, was a former cult member. Yes, she was in LifeSpring. I actually met her at an ex-cult conference, and she read Combating Cult Mind Control and invited me to speak at a congressional hearing, in fact, before she got turned into the right-wing QAnon person. Yeah, I haven't thought about Ginny in a long time, but I did there was a viral tweet thread that one of my people put together with the video of Ginny talking as a former member of LifeSpring. And I remember her just, around January 6th, after the 2020 election, frankly, was talking about how Biden was going to be arrested and sent to Gitmo, just crazy stuff. And of course, there's been a lot of media exposure on how Clarence Thomas has been the recipient of large gifts from billionaires. Let's see, NY Steve 369 on TikTok sent a gift calling Dr. Steve the GOAT. Thank you. Greatest of all time. I thank you, Steve. Do you think MAGA people were hypnotized? Leaving MAGA.org. So I know Rich Logis, who does Leaving MAGA.org. And do I think that people, MAGA people are hypnotized? Probably. So let's talk about speaking in tongues. We know that there are new apostolic Reformation churches and charismatic Catholics as well as Protestants. And when people ask me about this and they actually believe that it's the gift of the Holy Spirit and they actually believe that it's an ancient tongue, but people who are professional linguists and analyze any of these speaking in tongues phrases, etc., and that's not an ancient language at all. So, and then I want to comment an oddity that's come into my life recently was hearing about 3 separate people who intended to vote for Kamala Harris, who reported going to the polling station and having an overwhelming revulsion where they couldn't vote for Kamala and they had to vote for Trump, and one had a compulsion to vote for Trump even though he wanted to vote for Kamala Harris. And so I started entertaining the idea that maybe these folks have been hypnotized and given a post-hypnotic suggestion that when they get to the voting booth and see the voting paperwork that they would feel this aversion or compulsion. Pure speculation, but I definitely am of the opinion that many, many people have been shown deep fakes as well as disinformation. I'm aware that messages went to Jews to say Kamala Harris supports Hamas, and messages to Muslims that Kamala supports Netanyahu and the destruction of Gaza. So just to polarize Kamala's base. I'm going to just say also there's messaging going around that says all billionaires are evil on like a class level, and I think that's not true, and I think that it's a huge mistake. And what we want is the 200 plus American billionaires who aren't in the cult of Trump to be understanding they have a big responsibility, and they can either help or hinder or aid the enemy going forward. And I just think it's a huge mistake to just label them as evil because they've made a lot of money. A lot of billionaires are good people. The Simple Crystal said, how to engage with members who are nuanced but ultimately defer to belief. I believe in being clear in your own mind, studying the influence continuum, the bite model, studying. I have a book called Freedom of Mind, helping loved ones leave controlling people, cults, and beliefs. Study that. It's really about empowering people to think for themselves, but from a perspective of curiosity, respect, being willing yourself to change your mind. And that's what I say to people. I'm open to changing my mind, but give me evidence that makes sense, that's persuasive. I see Hannah on TikTok has sent a few gifts. Thanks, Hannah. So the bottom line is even planting little seeds is good. Being warm and kind to someone who hates you is planting a seed. But I also want to warn people not to allow yourself to be abused. So you can draw a line in the sand, or say, listen, I'm willing to talk with you, but you have to lower your volume to just talk with me. And if you're going to yell, then I'm going to have to leave. And you warn them. And if they continue, then you leave. Protect yourself. Let's see. Glum Old Chums. Any advice on how to talk to Utah reps? I can't get a hold of most of them, and it's hard to have a voice when you're not Mormon, and they run the state. I hear you. And a lot of angry former GOP voters have been wanting to talk to their reps, and so the reps are hiding out. So if they're not going to talk to their own constituents who are Mormon, for example, they're certainly not going to talk to other folks. So if you're not getting responses through official channels, think about messaging in other states or with ex-Mormons. And we need a lot of brilliant people to put their minds together, and we need to network and coordinate for the goal of human rights, which includes women's rights, gay rights, trans rights, indigenous rights, rights of minority religions, and understand that the fascist playbook is to pick one population off at a time. And if we're standing together, for example, with immigrant folks, even birthright citizens, if we're not standing with them, it's a big error. So that's what I have to say about that. My brother, similar to Ginny Thomas, in that they both were in cults. His was Lyndon LaRouche. How do you think that history made them vulnerable? So Lyndon LaRouche is interesting. You brought him up. I've been in touch with my friend Eve Messer, who was an operative, a member of the LaRouche cult, and he has a website up, LaRouche Planet, I think .wordpress. Great website. He's written a book recently on It's Viral, talking about mind control as a virus, which makes a lot of sense to me. And when you were born into an authoritarian cult or recruited into an authoritarian cult and you never got out and got counseling and education, um, you're vulnerable to getting sucked into another cult. We call this phenomenon cult hopping. So it's because it's familiar. It's the notion of a black and white, us versus them, good versus evil, having someone at the top who says they know what the truth is and follow them and everything will be okay. GT Fun Zone. I'm a certified hypnotherapist. We abide by a code of ethics like other professionals, go through rigorous training and testing. So certified by whom is my question. The American Association for Clinical Hypnosis is the only American organization I am aware of with mental health professionals who are properly trained and tested. I'm a member of that organization, even though I don't practice hypnotherapy. I'm also a member of the International Society of Hypnosis. Yeah, so there's a lot of people who have certificates that are printed out saying that they're certified hypnotherapists, but I want to know exactly who trained them with what. And I was involved with neurolinguistic programming in 1980 and 81, and I have lots of diplomas about that. And I got disillusioned with them because the NLP training was, in my opinion, amoral. They were not clear with ethics. Do not do to others what you don't want done to you. And nor are people trained to understand, psychological disorders. Let's see, Pam. MAGA may have some who are hypnotized, but isn't peer pressure, influence and pressure a huge component? Absolutely. Absolutely. So I recommend, if you are not aware of the ASH conformity study, ASCH, there are videos on YouTube. Solomon Ash did what he called a visual perception experiment, showing a placard with a sample size line and then 3 lines of different sizes. People in the room were in on the experiment except for one person, and they'd start giving the wrong answer. And the results after decades of doing this conformity test is about 2/3 start giving the wrong answer just to fit in. And that's where we have the social influence conformity factor. Svi Harkin, I feel I may be influenced to not vote. Yes, that I didn't mention that. Thanks for mentioning that. So some people had fear to vote for Kamala Harris, so they voted for Trump. Some people felt a compulsion, but many people who were expected to vote didn't vote at all. And could people be programmed to stay at home on voting day? Absolutely. Is everyone who's given those messages going to be receptive and obedient? No. But there really is a research project here. And so I would love to hear from anyone who feels like when they got to the voting booth, felt an overwhelming compulsion or revulsion, or felt like they wanted to vote but they couldn't get there, let me know. Will you ever release your book, Releasing the Bonds, on audio? So Releasing the Bonds was my second book, and it never went to paperback, and I never did an audio, and it's on my list of things to do. And I have audio versions of the 3 books that are up, Combating Freedom of Mind, The Cult of Trump. And I'm looking into getting them out in many languages and on audio as well. So stay tuned. If you don't subscribe to our once a week email, please do. And I'm planning on doing a lot more on my YouTube channel to develop that, and doing some deeper dives on specific cults and topics of interest, using basically my 50 years of direct experience. Dr. Right Life, do you think Trump and Putin are masochists who need to prove their potential denigrators wrong by controlling reality? No, they're not masochists. They're malignant narcissists. It's the opposite. They have the need to control. They have no empathy. They're sadistic. They're paranoid. They're revengeful. And I'm sure they do not take pleasure in pain. They like to inflict pain. It gives them a sense of power. I disagree. You don't become a billionaire by being ethical. You have the right to disagree. But I can tell you that if the goal is to preserve human rights, and especially in the United States, by doing this very simplistic all or nothing, good versus evil, and say all billionaires are evil, just think about it for a second. If you're a billionaire who's basically has a discovery that was used by so many people, and you have a philanthropy foundation, and people are calling you evil, is that going to motivate you to help, or push you to the MAGA side with the other billionaires? I'm not saying they would go to align with the MAGA billionaires, but then it's not going to motivate them to want to help those that are calling them names and think that they're evil. I don't agree, and I confess I've had some billionaire former clients, and they were very nice people. Good evening. And a lot of billionaires inherited wealth, by the way, and they just grew it by investments or hiring investors. Good evening, Dr. Hassan. I'm from Barbados. I'm enjoying your book, Freedom of Mind. One question, though: what is the end goal, the end game of these cults? Well, I say that cult leaders want power, money, and sex. There's a few cult leaders that didn't want sex, but almost everybody wants power over, and money gives them more power over. I think in the case of the cult of Trump, if you read my book, I talk about Putin and oligarchs in Russia wanting to take down America as a world power that can stop them from taking over Ukraine and other countries in that were part of the former Soviet Union. And unfortunately, or fortunately, we're on one planet together, and we can't let a few people who have malignant narcissism destroy the planet for everybody else. And the fossil fuel corporations, the Koch industries in particular in the US, has been using free speech as a tool to create division and disharmony. But if you try to speak with free speech criticizing them, then you get sued, you get silenced, the algorithms go against you. So the hypocrisy is really clear with Koch and with Musk, and with Zuckerberg. There's a book about Zuckerberg, which he's trying to suppress as well. So let's see. Rage of Lilith on TikTok sent the gift. Thank you. Be Heard sent a TikTok gift. Thank you. Be Heard. I like Be Heard. That's cute. I said Rage of Lilith already, and Be Heard. Let's see. Why is it that those who are in a cult never hold the leader accountable? Because they're programmed. It's always your fault if there's anything that goes wrong. The leader's always right, the doctrine's always right, or the leader can change the doctrine at his or her whim, almost always at his whim. And leaders are accountable only in a system where there's checks and balances, integrity matters, honesty matters. We need a free, independent press, a vibrant press. And right now, Trump is trying to shut down independent journalism, and we need people to investigate and shine a light on this. Dr. Hassan, how do you think the next 4 years will end with this MAGA cult? Honestly, I'm not thinking 4 years. I'm thinking the next few weeks and months are going to tell a lot about how the future is going to go. I am not holding my breath. There will be midterm elections that are free and fair, or the next presidential election. It'll be like Putin's elections in Russia, where there's no real opposition. And as we're wrapping up, I think we have a few minutes left. Have you ever worked with parents alienated from their children due to coercive control, abuse in the family dynamic? I've worked with lots of parents who are alienated from their children. The question is, did the parents do coercive control, or did one of the children see a bad therapist who did that? Or maybe the parents separated and one of the parents brainwashed the children against the mom or the father, typically the mom and their whole side of the family. So undue influence can exist in a one-on-one, in a family situation, in a large group awareness training group, multi-level marketing group, I think trafficking, labor and sex trafficking, religious cults of all kinds, and even political cults, as well as dictatorships. So I want to again encourage you it's your mind, only you should control it. Best course of action is to be aware, self-awareness, be in your body, in the here and now, with a positive future orientation. And if you're feeling overwhelmed with fear, then you're looking too broadly. Like, bring it down to what you can do today that's within your sphere of influence. And all I can say is I'm intending to keep on keeping on. I want to continue to do interesting podcasts and blogs. I'm going to be developing more content. I have more books that I want to put out, hopefully in other languages as well. I have a course workbook for my online course that is CE oriented for clinicians, but there's a much less expensive one for anybody who wants to take it. I call it the foundational course about cults. And thank you, Emma Stelina, for sending a gift. I really appreciate it. I guess we didn't get banned from TikTok this time, which has happened twice before, probably because I mentioned CHINA, and I'm being tricky, but I'm also doing it at the very end of the live stream. So if you're new to the understanding that there is a way of telling whether or not a group is ethical or unethical, come to Freedom of Mind. You have a QR code on the corner there. That's great. Take a snapshot of that. Download these and put them up everywhere in your community. That will help us get the word out. And I want to thank my team at Freedom of Mind, and come check out our YouTube. Thanks.